Hey, good morning, everybody. Kale Casey here with Chris Moore, our fire behavior specialist for the team. We want to thank you for yesterday, all the questions that we got from the audience. We've been working on answering those. And we also want to remind hunters, know before you go. There's big closure areas around the forest here where the firefighters are working. Please, hunters and firefighters, hunters and bulldozers, don't mix. Containment's up to 34%, and I wanted to bring on our fire specialist, fire science specialist, Chris Moore, because what he can do is help locals in the Ruth area and also the Post Mountain area and even beyond understand how the fire responds to sun, smoke, wind, and what have you. Chris Moore.
All right, so there are three things that kind of make a fire burn, and it's fuels, weather, and topography. And as everyone in the local area knows that it's been a very dry summer, so all those fuels are very dry and available to burn. It's like in your fireplace. We're from Alaska, we have a wood stove. You don't want to throw wet wood into your fire to get heat. You need dry wood, and that's what exactly is happening in the forest here. Both all the live and dead fuel that's in the forest is very dry and readily available to burn. The second thing you need is topography. Fire burns fastest or the most aggressively burning uphill. So when fuels, weather, and topography align, you have heavy, dry fuel, you have a very steep slope, and you have the wind blowing up that slope. That is the combination that produces the most extreme fire behavior. So what we have going on now is that the fire is here above Ruth. It's at kind of the mid-slope line. So for it to move, it's got to back down the hill, which is not the most aggressive way fires spread. They move more aggressively going uphill. So this is slowly backing down towards Ruth, and I'll get to the weather part at the end. And then the same thing's happening up here south of the 36 road. The fire has crested Rattlesnake Ridge and is now slowly backing down towards the highway. That doesn't mean the fire is not going to move, it's just moving at a slower pace. You might see from the highway that trees tend to torch. There's a lot of fuel on the ground. It'll burn those trees out, it'll send a few little spots out. But in general, the fire is going to want to burn back up the slope. So this will slowly continue back down, and this will slowly continue back down towards Ruth. And then the wild card is the weather. We have a meteorologist that works with us full time the whole time we're on an incident because that's the most variable part of this triangle. And what seems to have happened on this fire is that the fire has made big growth days or large growth events. When there's been a wind event, there's lots of wind. Same thing in the fireplace. You're adding wind to that. It makes the fuels burn more readily and more hot. And then the smoke is the other thing. It's kind of like the damper in the wood stove. When you have the damper all the way down, those fuels are not burning as aggressively as when you open it up and the fire can breathe just like your wood stove or your fireplace. So the last couple of days we've had the smoke settle in over the fire, and that's prevented the sun from reaching the fuels on the ground and mixing that air out and giving the fire some fresh oxygen to breathe. And that's the wild card as we go into the next couple of days. We're watching to see if the smoke is going to settle in. That's going to keep the fire behavior much lower than if there are areas where the sun gets to shine all the way down to the bottom and warm up those fuels. Then you can see isolated pockets of activity. But over the next couple of days, it seems like we have light winds, light transport winds, like further up in the atmosphere. So that means the smoke will settle in over the area and minimize the time during the day where we have those peak burning conditions.
Great, thanks, Chris. And just to hammer that home, because I think that's a really good point, the more smoke, to some degree, makes people nervous because they can't see the fire itself or don't know how fast it's moving.
Yeah.
But what I just heard and what I've seen in fire is when there's smoke, you can actually slow down the progression.
It's kind of like using that damper on the wood stove, right? When you close the flue, you're trapping everything in there, and yes, the fire is still burning, it's just not burning as hot or as aggressively as it is when there's fresh oxygen. So when you open that flue and you let that oxygen come in, then that fire picks up accordingly when it has fresh oxygen. So yes, when it's smoky around the fire, you're assuming that the fire is still burning, but at a much slower rate than if there was fresh wind and fresh oxygen being allowed to affect the fire.
Excellent. And the operations firefighter folks, they take your inputs.
Yep.
For example, in the Ruth area, they're trying to go more direct along the fire line today with the crew that just came into this division here above the structures in Ruth. So we've had some folks ask us, when can we get home to Ruth? It's under evacuation. It's going to take a while. We still have to build direct fire line. and this is holding pretty well, but they use your inputs to
Yes.
make their decisions, right?
Right, well, we have, last night we had wind light coming from the northeast, which is not going to affect the stuff on the mid-slope, but it is going to blow smoke this way. And then today it's going to move kind of at the northwest, so it's going to be blowing if it actually is strong enough to affect the fire area and get in through the smoke. This fire is backing down the slope, and it also has the wind blowing back up the slope, so it's not advantageous for rapid fire spread towards roofs. So that is giving them an opportunity to go in and assess if they can put people right on the fire edge and start putting the fire out.
Excellent. So we have a very offensive move right here for the Ruth folks. And then let's talk about this. In the last couple days, the team has been out looking to see how can we keep the fire, based on your input of that it's moving slowly, maybe on a ridge top. So I know we have 5 bulldozers yesterday that started working to try to tie this hash mark and this hash mark, to break it down for folks at home, is the bulldozer line. So they're going to try to connect this upper ridge before the 36
Yeah.
to see if we can take some action as it moves slowly, again, based on your inputs.
Yeah, so as this fire is slowly backing down the slope, I think between the 14th and the 17th, over that 3-day period, this fire, the spots had just started up on the ridge and it started slowly moving north. It had moved about a mile in those 3 days, so it's moving but at a slower rate. So now they're assessing if they can go in, find some roads along the ridges, open them up, and try and catch the fire before it hits the 36th road. And over the next couple of days, it seems like we have favorable weather conditions for that.
Now let's also zoom out. We're from Alaska, where the landscape is massive and we're used to big fires. This is a really, really big landscape, very
Yeah.
remote, right? So we're talking about a lot of colossal effort in here, and these are private bulldozer operators that we contract. They come with a heavy equipment manager that's from the fire team.
Yeah.
So we do use our private sector resources,
Yeah.
just like we use our loggers and our professionals. So folks in the area who've been wondering how the fire team operates, we're an interagency, local, state, county, federal group of people from Alaska and beyond, and then our private sector partners become part of our Green Pants Nation, part of our family. They're working in there
Yeah.
really hard. We just got an additional couple hand crews, one for this side, a couple in here. Those are 20-person working machines. They're very aggressive when they can be aggressive,
Yeah.
and they'll be trying to help prep this. Now, we only had them for a short period of time, so we need to keep on getting more resources so we can take this action. We have other plans around Post Mountain,
Yeah.
and if somebody lives in a fire scar, so you can see on Google Earth that some of these folks, like me in Alaska, my town burned down twice. One time last summer and 4 years ago, I live what's called in the black. So I feel fairly secure because I cut down all my dead trees. There are folks here who have fire scars. Will that help them?
Yes, to an extent, right? There's the Blue Mountain fire that was in 2015. That's kind of over here and seems to stop right before Post Mountain. And then there's also the Hackett fire scar, which is over here, which is also from 2015. And what we've seen over the life of the fire is that fires in the last couple of years are being barriers to fire spread. Fires from 2008 are not as effective because the grass and the brush grow back, and those are very flammable, so the fire can burn through those older fire scars. But more recent ones like the Hackett, the Blue and the Hackett, don't have enough vegetation in there to actively carry fire spread. So those are considered barriers at this point, and areas where the fire will burn slowly, right? We need fuels, weather, and topography, and in those fire scars, the fuels component is removed or minimized greatly in the last couple of years.
And to break that down, we call that's a natural fire-wise because it burned, but then individuals in Post Mountain, in Ruth, in Hayfork, in other areas, they should have been removing fuels for
Yes.
many years now. But I mean, we live with that community concern in Willow, Alaska because of how much fire we've had.
Yeah.
And we work locally to try to reduce fuels. People can be doing that at home if they're not leaving, and they should understand if they live with a lot of fuel around them,
Yeah.
the evacuation order is to protect their lives.
Yes. So, right, that fire triangle is what it's called, fuels, weather, and topography. You break any one of those legs, and you're going to have greatly reduced fire behavior. So, if around your house you have a lot of fuel and remove the fuel, you're trying to break that triangle. If you live in an area that's relatively dry and you set out sprinklers or you water, then you're changing the weather component of that triangle, and you're also breaking that leg of the triangle. So you're trying to give yourself the best option for success if a fire moves through the area. So you can't really change topography in a short amount of time, but the fuels and the weather are much more easily varied.
Excellent. And what we do mean by fuel is both your propane tanks and gas cans. Get those
Yes.
away from your houses and
Yes.
your structures, your greenhouses. your sheds, whatever you have. And then the other fuel will be brush, branches, trees,
Firewood
leaves.
that's stacked near near your house, or needles and other things that have accumulated on the roof or in and around the area. Those can catch embers that show up or that come in from the area from torching trees, and those can easily catch on fire. So anything from just those little needles or leaves around your house to the larger, pieces of firewood or brush that happens to be around there.
Excellent. And some folks might be wondering, like, well, it sounds scary. We plan for everything. We
Yeah.
plan for the ideal weather, the slow movement of fire. We prepare for if it blows out like it
Yeah.
did a couple weeks ago, which could mean we have to bring fire around Post Mountain. So as a fire organization, and with Chris's help, we are constantly planning for all possibilities, as you should at home. In my neighborhood, when things burn down, it's usually within 8 hours. It's usually
Yeah.
very fast on a wind event. And in the last 4 years, we've had 250 home losses in Willow, Alaska. So we know how fast fire can move, so we prepare for that. Best case scenario, we get work done here, we can check it up and slow it down.
Yes.
But Chris's job is each day to brief our team. So if we have a big change coming up, Chris will get you back on here.
Yes.
Thank you so much. And Eric, any questions to answer?
Most of them have been answered by the Trinity. One question was just overall about Kettenpong, just how they're doing with the behavior. So
Oh.
that's more a closure issue,
Yeah.
but if you can comment on the Kettenpong about.
This is not in our area, so I've been focusing on what's happening up here and haven't looked down there.
This is Cal Fire, the Cal State team, and not to be confused with the California 5 team that was here before, which is an interagency team. But thank you so much. We're going to let Chris get back to work. Please, whether you're on the live or on the rebroadcast, ask your questions here. Neighbors, if you can help neighbors out, if you don't have connectivity at home and you know somebody who does or doesn't, make that happen. Make those connections happen so people can get this information. We appreciate you sharing it. We appreciate you being along each day. We're going to do our best to answer every question. Thank you so much.